Hey, welcome everyone to ACCELQ Live virtual event, the second edition. But today we're focusing on testing Oracle Cloud apps. To kick things off right, really excited to have joining us Heather, who is a Senior Principal Product Advisor at HCM Cloud Customer Center of Excellence, North America at Oracle. So an awesome expert. She's also often referred to as the Oracle Apps Testing Guru. So really excited to have Heather join us. Hey, Heather, welcome to ACCELQ Live.
Hey, how are you?
Great to have you join us. Really excited about your session. Like I said, you are known as the Oracle testing guru. So really excited to have you join us.
Great.
And
I'll go ahead and, do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I have some slides to show. And then of course I'll share these with you post meeting, of course.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go over a lot of things and I'm going to talk as fast as I can because I know we have other people to speak as well. It basically dovetails into what and how do you test with Oracle updates, right? So when you have the quarterly updates, how do you test? So this is me. We just talked about it in the Center of Excellence Development Organization. And what we're going to talk about is updates, when, and how. How do they get applied? How do you know what to update? It's what's in the update and how to get started, right? So it's a lot, right? So we have a lot of different places in which customers can go look at to be able to understand the fundamentals behind Oracle updates. Documentation, MOS just stands for My Oracle Support. There are key portals, Cloud Customer Connect, docs.oracle.com, Cloud Policies, Environments, Updates, and Patches. So how do we make sense of all of this, right? I would say in the last 5-10 years, Oracle has done a really good job of trying to streamline the information and the release readiness area to be able to have customers understand where to go and how to get information to be successful. Cloud Customer Connect is one of those places. This is where I tell most of my customers to start with because it's the sounding board for this release readiness area here, which we're going to walk through, which contains all the information in terms of documentation. So this is where you can get your information to understand both what to test and what new feature functionalities you want to deploy as an organization. So this, again, this area is what has gotten the most improvement in terms of where to get the information. Now we have an actual Excel document that contains all of the feature functionality way back from the 19 series. The file now is about 10,000 rows of information. So if you're searching for particular functionality that you knew was deployed in a certain release, you can just click on it and I can show you the Excel document here in a second when I get out of screen sharing mode. And then you can go look at it. And there's a deep link in there. It takes you right to the documentation. You don't have to henpeck. You don't have to figure out how to get there. It takes you right to the pictures and sometimes even a video of how to deploy that functionality. So the update policy, again, just when are you consuming updates in your environments? How are you knowing what's coming when? So it all based upon the deployment schedule within Oracle Cloud. Hopefully everybody on the call understands what that is. If not, there are cohorts called A, B, and C. There's 4 releases a year. And depending upon which wave that you're on, we call them cohorts, but which month of the year that you get the updates, that'll be your timing for that. And just let me know if there's any questions as we go through. If you guys see anything in the question that people have questions about, just throw them at me and we can discuss them. In the update policy, again, the quarterly updates, and the reason why we're talking about the quarterly updates so much is because that dovetails into testing and that dovetails into automation and why that's so important. Because you want to get your top of stack testing remediation done with an automatic form. And then you can do more corner cases, that we like to call them, or more complex cases manually or with your functional teams. So again, this is what I just talked about, the 4 quarterly updates, A, B, and C. And then I created this diagram because it's really, really powerful in terms of visually understanding when those updates are going to hit your environment. So if we think about today, we are in cohort B in the June timeframe. So customers just received on 6/17 if you're in cohort B, 22B in your environment. Again, 22A is for May, was in May for A. So A, B, and C. Typically, customers who have payroll are in that first cohort or that first wave, as we like to say. So being able to plan for this, which is really nice. So now we have a standard operating procedure as it relates to when things are going to come out, so that you can have your HR calendar dovetail into when Oracle updates happen. And then this is a really big one. So we send out notifications to individuals that have cloud admin access in the application. This is the way we communicate with you in terms of when your environment goes down, when your updates are going to happen, any kind of maintenance that needs to happen in your environment. We always talk about how do other users in your company understand where this is located. You want to add them right to that contact tab, or you want to create your own email distribution list and make sure that they get those notifications. This just goes back into the Vertex updates, 19th and the 25th. You don't have to test for those, but the updates are out there. Those are a hot patching. There's no downtime for those. I'm going through this quickly because I want to get into the meat of the actual testing scenarios, but I wanted to make sure that people understood the fundamentals behind it. So this is really getting into the content that we want to talk about today. So quarterly updates and testing plans. So like I mentioned, we have done a really good job of doing the release readiness of the content and understanding from a functional perspective, what should you be testing? What is 90% of your application, 90-10 rule or 80-20 rule, depending upon your organization? What are the things in your organization from a top level that you need to test for to ensure that happens on day one after you get the update? Can you pay somebody? Can you hire somebody? Can you transfer somebody? Can you give somebody benefits? These are all things that don't change from a functional perspective very often. But what they do is you want to make sure that you're testing that top of stack to ensure that you're not going to have any problems. There's also a known issues article that you can download that gives you an understanding of things that have been fixed. And just to know, when we talk about fixes, in a lot of cases, because customers' environments are set up differently, your feature functionality set's going to be different than somebody else's, and your data truly is as well. So sometimes when we have feature updates, it may be a fix for only one customer because it's a corner case in terms of how they've configured the application. So just to note that when you see the list of the known issues, they may not relate to you, or they may relate to products that you don't have. So again, this is just the information center as it relates to legislative information from a payroll perspective. How to make sure you get hot topics, because hot topics is going to send you that legislative information from a payroll perspective. Again, just making sure that you understand the timing in which you need to be able to test for in those 2 weeks. How are you going to be able to get that testing done? And this is where and I'm going to go through these really quickly because we're going to talk right here on the continuous of what to test and why to test, how to test, what tools, regression, and automation, and how to get started. Okay. So I kind of put together this white paper, right, for a lot of customers who don't really understand what regression or automation testing actually means. How do you actually prepare for automation and testing? So what is automation testing, right? We call it ART internally. And Oracle's approach on regression testing. How do you get started? How is it different than what you currently do? So when I first talk to customers about testing, it's really important to understand where you're starting from. Do you just say, okay, Betty, go test payroll, Sally's testing benefits, and Tom is testing time and labor, for an example? Do you give them walkthroughs? Do you give them actual use cases that they need to go test them? Is it very rigorous in terms of how they're testing, when they're testing, and why they're testing? So what we find is customers who decide they're going to do automation testing, it gets them really, really super organized on how they're testing. So it gets them those scripts. And the scripts we talk about is something that we do in QA. We test thousands of scenarios, but it's that scenario level where you need to look at from a QA perspective, from an Oracle perspective. It says, these are the work streams by product line that you need to or should be testing from a high level, right? Okay, well, then how do you do that, right? We have click by clicks as well that we can share. So click by click scenarios, which are vanilla, that you can add to. But how can you take it one step further and automate that process versus having everybody have hands on keyboard, being able to consume the testing and do it manually? Because what we really want is on day one, when you have that 2-week window, we really want on day one, after your environment comes back up, sometimes on Saturday timeframe, you want to be able to know and run your automated scripts on day one to say what's passed and what's failed. Because we have, a very short window to ensure that testing scenario can either be remediated or fixed prior to your going into production. So any questions so far out there?
Actually, we do have one question. They wanted to know about how can we get the calendar for Oracle ERP Cloud staging, production, and testing window?
It's the same as HCM. ERP is linked with HCM. So if you're in finance or ERP, it's the same delivery schedule.
Okay.
No different.
Perfect.
Great question, though.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's all we have so far.
Okay, great.
Cool.
So I just talked about this a little bit. What is regression testing? And, way back when people were like, oh, well, Oracle doesn't allow regression testing. Well, that's true in production, right? But not in the lower environment any longer. So we have updated our cloud hosting and policy delivery to allow users to be able to do regression testing, right? So you're scripting for a user, in this case, to be able to go through the application just like you would if you were behind your keyboard, right? So we're not talking about load testing or performance testing where you're sending thousands and thousands of scenarios. These are very critical scenarios in order to make sure that your application works as intended after an update, right? So it's very similar if you guys are familiar with or have implemented any products, doesn't have to be Oracle, what's called user acceptance testing or system integration testing, SIT. These are very similar use cases that you would go through to make sure the application works as intended, right? So that's what we're talking about. But now it's not the same level when you're live, right? So you shouldn't have to be doing a full suite of regression testing for your entire application. Again, top of stack, top of mind of the key critical things you want to be able to test for. So how do you prepare for it, right? So we want to go through the standard workflows, right? You want to understand what those are. And when we talk about vendors, which we'll get into here in a minute, we're really, vendor agnostic because each company, decides on what's best for them. We have some customers who have huge Selenium houses that do regression testing on every single application they own, and they run scripts all day long. Great. We have some customers who have 2 people in HR and they're supporting their system. They don't have that knowledge, expertise, or time, money, and energy. So there's outsourcing that can happen, right? And then there's a hybrid of those. So the great thing right now is that with all of these testing services or products that are out there, it gives you that benefit of being able to consume the testing quickly and then not really having to know how to code, right? So there's something for everybody in terms of their level of sophistication around coding and around regression testing. So again, starting off of what are your standard workflows and what are you testing? especially with payroll and staging that and doing the rollback and then pre and post test. That gives you your best chance for success, especially when it comes to the sophistication of payroll. So what to consider before you're testing, before you take on automation? What are your manual tests that you currently have? Get your team together from all the functional, technical, different work streams and kind of start consuming all of those. The good news, again, we have a lot of that repository, so you don't have to start from scratch of knowing what those are. What are the top 300 or 500 scripts that I should be looking at as an organization? And what are the impacts or any impacts that I might have from that release readiness documentation? So again, we talked about Selenium as the tool. And the reason why we started with the automation regression testing, 5-6 years ago? And we started with Selenium, and the reason why is because it's free. So we didn't want customers to have to pay for something additional. So it's freeware. So you're able to download it for free and be able to utilize it. So that's an option if you have, the team or the knowledge of how to write in Selenium. If not, there's many partners out there, which we'll talk about, to be able to consume. We talked about the hosting and delivery policy already, that it allows you to do this. Again, first identifying the manual scripts. We've talked about that several times. The documentation here just kind of walks you through that to ensure that you understand what to test and what not to test. And then this is kind of an example. This is edit tax withholding, right? So this is a script per se that you would be writing, but it gives you the design steps. So it gives you the actual click-by-click scenario and how you would stage data when you're talking about doing manual testing, that then you convert your manual testing into actual scripted automation testing. So this is just an example of that code line. So you can kind of understand it. And then being able to understand, again, why you would want to do automation testing. We have static IDs in the application from a responsive UI perspective. So if you are coding in like a Selenium, for an example, those are static IDs. And those static IDs then don't change from version to version. So before we used to have about 30% dropout from scripts to scripts, but now you don't have to worry about that. So how is this different? As I just talked about, utilizing the element IDs between releases, those don't change. So that was a very positive thing when we moved over to the responsive UI. Again, you don't have to use Selenium. You can use any testing platform that you'd like, as long as it's a DOM or document object model for the locators. Concepts, again, static IDs versus Fusion element locators. Again, I'm going very quickly. I know you have limited time. Basic concepts, wildcarding, complex locators. Again, we'll share this deck. You guys will be able to consume it at your leisure. You can yourself look at the web inspector to kind of understand information. This is a screenshot of being able to look at that web inspector. Again, if you're not a coder, if you don't understand the coding behind it, it's perfectly okay. As we mentioned, there's a lot of vendors out there that you can go through the UI and machine learning, clicking on the UI itself that creates the scripts for you, right? So there's a lot of different ways in which you can consume automated regression testing without having to build scripts. And then the rest of the deck just goes through a more deep dive into actually building your scripts, right? In terms of the language behind it, and then getting the boxes behind it. So I wanted to make sure that I'm going to go ahead and go through to, here we go. So these are the partners. And then this is the slide that I'll probably end on, and then we can ask questions if they'd like. So automation testing partners, right? So a lot of the different SIs out there who implement with you have services, testing services, Scenaritech, ACCELQ, as we're talking about today, and then Autonomic, right? So it depends upon, again, what you're trying to go solve for. I was just out in Vegas for 2 weeks, and I must have met 10 different partners who are doing automation regression testing, which is fabulous because we see it as a game changer for you, not only for the updates to be able to consume with feeling really good about that, you're not going to have any regressions, but also being able to consume newness quicker because you're then going to be able to do regression testing against your new functionality. So it's going to be able to, for you to be able to consume newness faster in your organization. So again, this is more of a philosophy than it is an approach of what tools should I use. So we really see the benefits of customers who do this because on day one, they're able to understand if they have any regressions. Yes or no, pass, fail, right? That's really the benefit of it versus finding out on week 2 because somebody was out of the office and didn't get a chance to test payroll on a retro basis, and then you have an issue, right? That's really a hard thing to have to try to spin around. So these are just some questions you can be asking yourself on how to get ready for automation regression testing. It's a philosophy. Being able to get yourself very, very organized as an organization. And then many customers, as we've mentioned, end up outsourcing it to a third party just because of the ease of use. Great. And this just talks about the reason why in terms of the risk for the demand of capabilities in the application. What questions do we have?
Right, Heather, we have quite a few actually. So let's
good.
Bring them up. First one is,
yeah.
How do you consider opt-in expiration ACM ERP Cloud during every upgrade?
So opt-in, so you're talking about new feature functionality opt-in?
I assume they are. If not, please give some clarification whoever asked that question, but I believe they are.
Yeah, so you would add those to your script scenarios. And again, based upon the feature functionality of the what's new documentation and looking at the release readiness notes, what has changed that you need to be able to add to your design? Like what things in the UI have changed that or a process flow has changed you need to go test for. So that would be building it based upon the release notes, right? So what do you need to go look at and make sure of when you're doing that? And sometimes if they're corner cases, you can do those manually. But then again, all of that heavy lifting from an automated standpoint are being done with the regression scripts.
Someone wants to know, is there any automated mechanism for identifying impacted test suites?
Yeah. So when you go to the release readiness information that I mentioned, there's actually a functional guide that gives you impact analysis within each product line. So it actually gives you a grid in that release readiness documentation that tells you high, medium, low, and whether it's turned off or turned on upon deployment. And then what that level of effort is for each individual feature. Hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. All right. So next question is there any recommended best practices with respect to maximum and minimum number of regression cycles?
Yeah. So, I always tell people that as long as you've run through the critical regression scripts as it relates to payroll, retro, hiring people, terminating people, transferring people, benefits, the things that really matter in your organization, as long as you run through those scenarios once and you have regression scripts for the top of the stack, then you should be good, right? Where I think it's hard is when you don't have a solid testing foundation and you're kind of just henpecking your testing. You don't capture everything, right? You don't capture the things that matter through the entire workflow from beginning to end. You'll test individual features. But again, as we all know, the suite is combined within ERP and CX and HCM, and data moves throughout the application. So being able to test that beginning to end processes is really important.
Perfect. All right. Questions keep coming. Next one is, With Oracle having quarterly releases, how can testers be proactively prepared?
Yeah, so the good news is that we actually release two months prior to GA, the new release. So 22C, which is coming out, right, has already been released on June 3rd. So every 2 months prior to GA, on that first Friday of the month, we come out with release notes. So you have an entire 2 months, or 2.5 months really, to look at release readiness, impact analysis before that next release hits your environment. And if you're not on cohort A and you're on cohort B, then you get 3 months. And if you're on cohort C, then you get 4 months, right? So we have been proactively releasing that information a lot sooner than we used to.
Nice. Great information. So next question is it necessary to test financial reporting OTBI-based scenarios for every upgrade?
It is. With the release readiness, we do have OTBI report areas. So it's impactful to understand if any of those report areas have changed. And I always say, again, what reporting are you utilizing in your organization that you send downstream or to individuals to do their day in, day out job? So maybe not all reports are that important, that they're ancillary to your organization, but they're not something that's making your organization work. But like pay files you're sending to a third party like ADP or something, or time files to pay people, those things that you're utilizing either an OTBI or a BIP reports are important.
Great answer. All right, so this is a good question as well. Does Oracle have pre-written scripts that they share with customers?
So we have pre-written scenarios, right? So we have like the workflows, what you should be testing by pillar, right? So, and I'm happy to share that with this team of what we currently have. I think there's several hundred on that list. And then if you want the actual click by clicks, I can get you those as well. But we do share those because it's just basically going through the UI, but we don't want customers to have to build those from scratch, right? Have to go through the keystrokes or the clicks. But again, that goes back to the automation with the testing folks to be able to help you with that as well. But yes, we can definitely give you the high level in terms of, I have them for HSIM. I'm sure that we have them for the other pillars as well.
Great. All right. So here's a question you might get asked a lot, and it is, over a period of time, does jobs in QA will get decreased, or like manual tester or automated tester? So what's your outlook for testers in general, especially with Oracle app testing? Seems to be more and more automated, but I guess they're curious to know your opinion.
So the question is, do we see more automation in testing? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. So we are finding that customers who utilize testing and start the process, of course, it's always it takes time in the beginning, but the benefit outweighs any of the time in the beginning, because the more automation you have, the more time that you have, the more freedom that you have to be able to consume, like I mentioned before, the newness, new feature functionality sets, and then being able to test those corner cases in your environment, in your company that could bite you, right? That you're doing on an off-cycle basis or whatever is coming out that you can test for. But automation, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So, like I said, a lot of questions are coming in. Next one is
good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're knocking them out of the park, so thank you for that. Really quick, so that's good. How do you manage test automation of UI, API, spreadsheet based scenarios?
So I'm guessing that you're talking about, you have an API that you're currently utilizing from, maybe you're sending data to an external source, or you're trying to retrieve data. I'm not sure exactly what, if they're talking about, if they're writing scripts from an API. So I'm trying to understand what the model is there. But again, you can you can automate any of the testing scenarios you're trying to work with. But again, having your environments and your P2Ts set for your lower environment so that you can test all your integrations and you can test your APIs.
Great. All right. So now some other questions coming in. I think this one may have been pre-submitted, and it is, what advice would you give other teams or organizations planning to kick off the journey in test automation?
I just say just do it, right? Just start. Again, look at all the different vendors, decide in your organization who has the skill sets. Do you want to consume it yourself? Do you want to utilize a third party to be able to do it? There's so much available to you. Some of them have machine learning where you're clicking in the UI and you're building your own scripts and then you can run them. There are companies that do the full suite of testing for you and then give you an output, right? Did it pass or fail? And there's hybrid approaches to both. So just get started because it's going to save you a ton of money, time, and energy as you go through this process, because you're really, again, you're going to refine your testing suites. And then you're going to feel more empowered because you know exactly what to test, how to test, and when to test.
Perfect. Okay. Another question is, what is the maximum number of days for every upgrade for complete regression?
So basically, in most cases, and I'll explain most here, you have 2 weeks, right, to test between you get it in your lower environment, your stage environment, it's that first Friday of every single month, and then you get it in your third Friday of every single month of that month for quarterly updates. You get that on that third Friday. So basically, you have 2 weeks to test. Now, there are some caveats to that. So if you do what's called soak testing, which I'm a part of, customers consume the application a month prior to GA. So they have a month and a half to test the application, right? Those are SOAP customers. We have about 35 very, very, very large strategic customers in the program. Anybody can submit a request for it if you'd like to. Then we also have on the other end, we have what's called A6, which you can consume a version on that first Friday of the month, and then you don't get it in production until the following month. So it's a month and a half, basically, just on the other end. So, but for most customers, it's just a 2-week window of being able to consume it and then test for it. That's why it's really, really important that you have your regression scripts, because then on that first day, you have your high level taken care of, right? And then that first week, you should always consume and have all of your payroll testing done that first week. And then you have your other pillars the second week. So that's really kind of from a functional standpoint, the additional testing that you're doing like hands-on keyboard, but you want to make sure that all your payroll workflows are done that first week.
Great. All right. So I don't think I've ever run an event the past year or so where someone doesn't ask something about AI, machine learning. Don't know if you have any opinions on it, Heather, but you must get this asked all the time. You said you were just at a bunch of shows in Vegas. So any thoughts on this, AI, machine learning?
Yeah, we have, I have a whole entire slide that I just actually showed in this last meeting that I was on prior to this meeting. We have a whole entire deck on AI machine learning, right? So we in the application have embraced machine learning, not necessarily from a testing perspective, but it is embedded in testing. So when I talk about that, there's machine learning and algorithms from different companies that are doing testing scenarios to be able to build those scripts for you, right? So that's kind of baked into some of the vendors that I've talked with. But we also have machine learning and AI from a functional standpoint in the application as well. So how to pick the best match or fit from a recruiting standpoint, or what to serve up to you from a learning perspective, or where is your talent in terms of the application. So that's getting a little bit in terms of the visioning of the HCM application in total, but it's totally baked into the application.
Perfect. All right, Heather, I think we have time for about one more question. And
sure.
I think you kind of touched on this already with one of the others is where do you see the future of test automation heading, and how vital is no-code test automation's role in this particular journey in test automation?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's incredible. Like, just when I started the art program within Oracle, like 6 years ago, nobody really kind of understood it, right? Wasn't something that we did. And now it's just so prevalent, and it just becomes second nature for individuals to do automation. Anything that we don't have to do manually anymore, there's no reason to, right? So we're just trying to give people time back, because a lot of people have, you know, more work than they have time. And a lot of teams are smaller because of the, war on talent that we currently have. So being able to make things work better, faster, stronger, smarter, those types of things versus harder is always beneficial.
Great. And someone just wrote in the chat, I don't know if you know anything about this, is they want to know, in one of the slides you showed some testing tools, but they said they didn't see Oats Oracle testing tool. Is that
Oh
something
yeah, you certainly can use. You can certainly use Oats. It now works with HCM. There was some components there several years ago that didn't work. You can use Oats. It's just you have to pay for it, right?
Gotcha.
If you own it already and you're using it, you can definitely use it with the SaaS application.
Perfect.
Good call out.
Yeah, cool. So Heather, those are all the questions we have. I want to thank you so much. You did an excellent job, really thorough. So we really appreciate you for joining us and sharing your knowledge with the ACCELQ Live. Really appreciate you.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.